first thing I want us to do together, hopefully you're joining me, is to create this accordion effect. If you look at this page, when I hover over these containers, they kind of have an animation that they slide and reveal themselves. And then I also have this text going in and out of the container. And if you look here at the bottom, you also see this nice animation of the rotating arrow. Cool. So let's start. I'm going to start by duplicating this bottom card. And when I place it, it's important that it's not going to be a child element of the bottom container. Do you see when I hover here, it asks me to attach it? If I attach it, it's going to automatically become a child of the bottom container. And I don't want that to happen, because once I apply a hover effect, I want it to be unique to the second container. And if it's a child of the bottom container, the effect is going to be applied also to the bottom container, and maybe only to the bottom container. I don't know, because it's a child. So one way I can avoid that is press the escape key, and then you see the attach disappears, and I can place it here. I'm going to create another one, copy paste, I'm dragging it, it asks me to attach, I'm pressing escape. Awesome. Okay, let's look at it and make sure I don't have any margins that I don't want. See here, a bottom margin of -2 pixels. I'm gonna make it 0 so it lines up nicely. And by the way, if you're not familiar, this right here is the inspector panel. I can click on any element on the canvas here and then open the inspector panel and see all these properties that I can use: positioning and sizing and adjustments or initial position, so many things, overflow content. There's so much to discover here. And not only that, there's also design properties and the interactions, which we're going to talk about. Okay, cool. One thing I noticed here out of the box is that I'm missing this left border. So one way to do it is actually to open the add panel. Under decorative, vertical lines, I can grab this line and attach it here. Now I can stretch it. If you see this kind of stretch button here, so I click on it, but as you can see, because this is a grid with 3 cells, it only fills up my top cell. If I wanted to go from bottom to top, I can look right here at the inspector panel and see that right now my line element only covers the upper part of the grid. So if I wanted to cover all cells, I can press Shift, click here on the bottom and on the middle, and look how nicely it just adjusts itself to the full height of the container. Great. Now I also wanted to stick to the left side, so I'm gonna lose this margin. Great. And if I want to change the color, because it came as a default color in gray, I can click on the design, line color, black. This is how easy it is, guys. So God, you should really try it out. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. Grab here this vertical line, place it in the third container. This time, I want to show you how I position it using this positioning, aligning kind of tool. See, if I hover over it, it tells me like I can align to right, align to left. So I'm going to align it to left and stretch it. And again, press Shift, and I want it for the full height and change the color to black. Great. Let's preview what we have. Cool. Do you see this bottom line? I think it's hiding behind these 2 cards. Let's adjust that. First of all, how am I going to grab it? I can go here to the layers panel, click on this bottom line. See how easy it is to navigate here in the layers panel? Okay, and I just want to make sure I can press on these 3 dots and say arrange and move this element to the front. Now let's preview it. Awesome. Okay, great. Now, because I duplicated the containers, they're all called container 1. Let's change that. I'm pressing here again and renaming this to container 2, and this one to container 3. Rename container 3. Great. Okay. So how about we get into the interesting, one of the interesting things here. We want to position these two containers for them to actually start here on the right, because as you see in our end result, they're placed right here. And then when I hover over them, they go into this position. So I can do that. I can adjust an element, adjust its initial position. And I do it by clicking here. Do you see the adjust? So I'm going to press it, and then I get this panel opening up, and I'm going to translate the element 60.5% to the right. Again, I'm using percentage because I want it to move to the right 60% of its parent element, okay, in any screen size. If I would have done that in pixels, it would have just been fixed. Like it would move to the right exactly 200 pixels no matter what screen size I would be using. So I'm always going to use percentage, not always, but for this case, I'm using percentage. I'm going to do the same thing with the third container here, 60.5%. Great. And also I want to make sure that my elements are docked to the left. I want them always to relate to this left side of the element of their parent. So I'm going to dock it to the left and change this to 26.4%. Again, I'm using percentage in order to make it flexible and adjust to different screen sizes. And here I'm going to use, again, dock it to the left. I'm going to do 13.2%. Great. Now, you saw that I adjusted the initial state, but in order to view it, I need to press preview. I'm not going to see it here. So let's press preview, and bam, look at that. Nice. Okay. So now starts the magic. But first, let's change these images so that they don't just all look the same. Change image. You know, Wix has these beautiful images, just anything you like. I don't know. This looks kind of cool. Donation center. Update. And then here, I'm going to change this image to, I don't know. These sheep look quite nice. Okay. All right, great. Let's preview. Awesome. Okay, now comes the fun part with the interactions. When I want to animate something, I can press on it, open the inspector panel, and go to interactions. And I have two options here. I can create an effect on the element. This is the actual animation. And I can also decide to create a trigger, like what's going to trigger an effect. It's either a click or a hover. I can do all that. So let's start by creating the effect. We'll create this effect and we get all these options, but we're going to customize. So we're going to call this container 3 slide and start designing. Then we have this thing, which is cool. Here in this bar that opens to us, we can basically create the animation. We have an initial state. This is what it's going to look like in the beginning, right? And then when we want to apply the effect, we want to adjust the translation back to its original place, which is 0. Let's play this animation. Cool. Okay. Now it's not enough to create an effect. We have to apply it to a trigger that, plays the animation. So we're adding on this container a trigger, a hover interaction, and saying that the affected element is the container itself. We're applying an effect, and the effect is what we created, which is the container 3 slide. Done. Now let's click preview and see what happens. Awesome. And because we set it in percentage, if I change the width here, it's still going to look good. It's still going to move 60.5% of its parent element, so it's always going to look good. It's not going to get out of the container. Okay, great. Let's do the same thing with the middle container. We'll add an effect, customize it, call it container to slide. Again, I can choose here the initial state. Okay, it's right here. And then when I apply the animation, I want it to move back to 0. Great. And did you see, once I applied created the effect, I got a timing set right here for the container. I can decide when the effect starts, when it ends, what ease it has. Great. So now we go to triggers of the second container, add a trigger. When I hover over the middle element, I'm going to apply an effect, and it's going to be container to slide. Let's preview. All right, awesome. Awesome. Okay, so I do notice that my sheep here, I can't see them quite well. I want to change that. You know what I can do? If I go to the image and focus it, I get this bar, and there's a focal point property here. I can actually grab this, change the focal point, and it's going to change what I see in the image. Let's see what it did. Preview. Oh, nice. Now I see this sheep here. Looks kind of okay. And anyways, you can use any photos you like. Let's do the same with the image here. Click on it, change the focal point, and raise it a little bit so I see some faces, folks. Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. Great. Let's preview. All right. So now let's just notice one thing. When I hover over the third container, I also want the second container to move as well. And I can do that quite easily. If I open the inspector panel, press on the third container, I can add a new interaction. And not just on the third container, I can say the affected element is actually, and choose it on the canvas, is the middle container. And I can apply an effect to it, and it's going to be the container to slide. So let's preview this. If I hover over the third, they both move. That's so freaking awesome. And it still looks good in a different screen size. Look at that. Great. Okay. So now let's also design the effect of the stack. Do you remember this? This is the text that goes in and out like that when I hover over the element. That's pretty cool. So let's do it. Okay, I'm hovering, and what is a stack? It's basically a grouping in a flex box, which is CSS, and I can group in a flexbox these elements, the text, the title, this middle description, and a button that's placed inside a container. And I can apply an animation on it. So I'm going to apply this effect, add an effect, customize it, and I'm going to say stack 3 appear and start designing it. Now initially I want it to be out of my view. I can do that and just first set the initial state of this element. So I want it to be 100% of itself to the right so I don't see it. And let's also add 0 opacity, okay, so that it doesn't show up here. Great. And then the animation is going to be that we see it 100% and it goes back to its position. I can play this animation. This is what it's going to look like. Cool. All right. So now when I hover over the third container, I can add a new interaction and choose on the canvas the stack. Now I don't see it because the initial state of it is opacity 0 and out of our view. So I can choose it in the layers panel. How awesome is that? And I'm applying the effect, stack 3 appear. Let's check it out. Awesome. Same thing I'm going to do to the middle stack. Let's create an effect. Okay, its initial state is going to be 100% to the right, opacity 0, and then in the effect it's going to appear. Great. And now when I hover over the second container, I'm adding a new interaction, choosing on the canvas. Again, I can't see it, but I can go here. Then you see how important it is to name your containers. This is container 2. This is the stack. Okay. And I'm applying the effect, stack 2 appear. Okay, let's preview. Nice. That's cool. Now we still have a problem with this bottom container. We want to make sure that when we press either the second, when we hover over the second or the third container, then this text is going to have the opposite animation. Initially we see it, but when we hover over these, it's going to disappear to the right and change its opacity to 0. So let's do that. Add an effect, custom, stack 1 disappear. Start designing. Okay, so initially I see it, right? And then the stack 1 disappear effect is going to be that it translates to the right 100% of itself, of its width, and the opacity is going to be 0. So let's play this. Great. Okay, so now we need to apply this effect when we hover over the third and second container. Let's do that. We're now focused on the third container. We add a new interaction and we're going to choose on the canvas the stack here of the bottom container, apply an effect, stack 1 disappear. Same thing we're going to do to the middle container, add a new interaction, choose on canvas, stack 1 disappear. All right, let's see what we got. Super, super awesome. Okay, how about we publish and see what it looks like in the live site. We click on publish, go here. This was our initial project. I'm gonna refresh it. All right. Super cool. And if I resize, I still get this. Nice. All right. So let's go on and take care of these arrows here. Okay, we're going to edit. Okay, so initially, whenever a card is opened, we want to have this arrow straight like this, right? Like this. And then every time a card opens, the arrow rotates this way. Okay, let's create that. Again, zero code. Love it. All right. So initially, let's get back to our container, bottom container, to this arrow and say, here in the adjust, which is basically setting our initial state, we can rotate it minus 45 degrees. Oh, it straightens it. Let's preview. Great, this is how we start. But now I want it to happen every time I hover over a card. So let's add an effect on these arrows. Let's start with the third container. Add an effect, custom, and I'll call it arrow 3 rotate. Okay, so initially this is what it's going to look like, right? This is the initial state. And then the arrow 3 rotate, I'm adjusting the rotate here to minus 45 degrees. Let's see it in action. Very, very cool. So remember, it's not only creating the effect, we have to apply it to some kind of trigger, right? So when I hover over this container, I'm adding a new interaction, choosing it on the canvas, which is my arrow right here. And I'm going to say apply an effect, arrow 3 rotate. Let's check it out. I'm hovering over it. Bang! Works like a charm. Okay, same thing I'm going to do to my middle card, to the arrow, add an effect to it. I'm going to call it arrow 2 rotate. Start designing. This is the initial state, right? And the rotate is the actual effect, minus 45 degrees. Let's play it. Awesome. And now, when we hover over the second container, we're going to choose the affected element, which is this arrow right here, and apply the effect. Great, let's preview. I like, every time I do one thing, I like to preview it just to make sure that it works. Sometimes you do so many things at once, you don't know what went wrong afterwards. But as you can see, this is working. Now we got to reverse, we got to do also an effect on this arrow right here, because when we hover over the second and the third cards, we need to rotate this the opposite direction, right? Almost the same thing as we did with the text. So let's add an effect. Okay, call it arrow 1 rotate. And initially the card is open. So this is going to be with a minus 45 degrees rotation, right? This is the initial state. But once I want to rotate it, it's actually going to go back to 0. Nice. Let's play it. Okay, now when does this happen? Only when I hover over the middle container and the third container. So let's do this. Trigger. Add a new interaction. What is the affected element? It's this nice arrow right here. And I'm going to apply an effect. Arrow 1 rotate. Same thing I'm going to do with the third container. Add a new interaction. Choose on the canvas. arrow and rotate. Done. Let's preview this. Check it out. Nice. I'm going to publish. All right. Okay. Look at that. Super, super nice. And it's also responsive. So whenever I resize it here, I still get this nice animation working nicely according to the screen size. Now also notice there's also all kinds of stuff I didn't show you today, like the scaling of the text here on the left, how it changes with the side. There's so much to do here, but this is a beginning. This is just a little bit in a nutshell of what you can do, and we'll cover more things in the future. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll see you next time.